Today we will be looking at two horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On Saturday, June 1st, 2019, two men made a decision they didn't understand the consequences of. They pulled their rented truck into the parking lot of a local diner near Locomotive Breath Cave in Virginia, grabbed their gear, and headed toward the cave entrance with all the confidence of people who had absolutely no idea what they were doing. These weren't experienced cavers. They hadn't trained with a grotto. They hadn't studied the cave's map. They hadn't even bothered to research basic caving safety protocols. When asked later why they'd chosen this particular cave, one of them said something that should have been a massive red flag. We wanted to really dive in and do the hard stuff. The hard stuff. As if caving was like choosing the expert slope on a ski mountain, where the worst that could happen is you fall down and feel embarrassed. Locomotive Breath. Cave isn't a tourist attraction with handrails and guided tours. It's a wild cave, unmapped sections, tight squeezes, multiple passages that branch off in different directions, and absolutely zero lighting except what you bring with you. The hard stuff in Locomotive Breath Cave means crawling through spaces barely wider than your body, navigating vertical drops, and keeping track of every turn you make so you can reverse your route on the way out. But these two men didn't know any of that, or if they did, they didn't care. They had flashlights, they had enthusiasm, they had confidence, and that was enough, right? They entered the cave on Saturday afternoon, probably excited, probably joking around, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness as they ventured deeper. The cave mouth gave way to passages, and those passages split into more passages, and before long, they were in a three-dimensional maze where every tunnel looked essentially the same. Gray limestone walls, rocky floors, darkness in every direction. About an hour in, their first flashlight died. Now, here's what experienced cavers know. You bring redundant lighting, not one flashlight, not two. You bring at least 3 independent light sources per person, and you check all of them before you enter the cave. Batteries die, bulbs burn out, equipment fails. If you're in a cave when your last light dies, you're not just in the dark. You're in a darkness so complete that your brain can't process it. You literally cannot see your hand in front of your face. You cannot navigate. You cannot find your way out. You're just stuck. But when that first flashlight died, these two men still had other lights. So they kept going. They ventured deeper into Locomotive Breath Cave, farther from the entrance, farther from safety. Not yet worried, because they could still see. The passages twisted and turned. They climbed over boulder piles, they squeezed through tight sections, and at some point, maybe gradually, maybe suddenly, they realized they had no idea where they were. They were lost. And then their other lights started dying, one by one, click. Darkness creeping in, click. Another light gone. Their world shrinking with each failed battery until they were down to maybe 1 or 2 working flashlights between them, and the panic was starting to set in because they couldn't find the way out, and they were running out of light and they were running out of time. That's when they made what might be the single worst decision of this entire disaster. They decided to split up. Think about that for a second. 2 inexperienced men, lost in a cave with dying flashlights, decided that separating would somehow improve their situation. Maybe they thought they could cover more ground that way. Maybe they figured if one of them found the exit, they could come back for the other. Maybe the panic had scrambled their thinking so thoroughly that splitting up seemed logical. Whatever their reasoning, it was catastrophically wrong. Now they weren't just 2 lost people who could help each other. They were 2 isolated individuals, alone in the dark, with no way to find each other again, even if they wanted to. The hours passed. Saturday became Sunday. Their flashlights died completely. And now they were in total darkness, the kind of darkness that doesn't exist above ground, the kind that makes you lose all sense of direction and time and space. They couldn't see where they were. They couldn't see where they'd been. They couldn't find each other. All they could do was sit still and wait and hope. Sunday became Monday. Above ground, one of the men didn't show up for work. His family started making calls, no answer. They called his friend, no answer either. By Monday evening, family members were genuinely worried. These two men had vanished. The search began, but nobody knew where to look. The men hadn't told anyone where they were going. They'd just rented a truck, driven off, and disappeared. Investigators eventually got smart and used the rental truck's OnStar system to locate the vehicle. It was sitting in that diner parking lot where it had been since Saturday. Friends of the missing men suggested they might have gone caving. Apparently, the men had mentioned interest in exploring caves. Rescue teams were dispatched to Locomotive Breath Cave for an initial search. They entered the cave, called out, searched the main passages, and they found nothing. The searchers concluded the men weren't in that cave and concentrated their efforts elsewhere. Maybe they'd gone to a different cave. Maybe they'd gone hiking and gotten lost in the woods. The search expanded to other areas while the two men remained lost in the darkness of Locomotive Breath Cave, undiscovered, slowly dying. Because that's what was happening. They weren't just sitting in an uncomfortable cave waiting to be found. They were experiencing hypothermia. The temperature in caves stays constant year-round, usually somewhere in the 50s Fahrenheit. That doesn't sound dangerously cold until you realize you're sitting still in damp clothes and 55-degree air for days on end with no heat source, no dry clothes, no way to warm up. Hypothermia progresses in stages. First, you shiver uncontrollably, your body's desperate attempt to generate heat. Then you become confused, lethargic. Your speech slurs. You make poor decisions, though in this case, they had already made all their poor decisions. Then you stop shivering, and that's when you know it's really bad, because it means your body has given up on trying to warm itself. Your core temperature has dropped so low that your body is prioritizing keeping your vital organs barely functioning instead of wasting energy on muscle contractions. When you stop shivering, you're in the late stages of hypothermia. You're dying. Monday became Tuesday. Tuesday became Wednesday. 4 days. 4 days these men sat in total darkness in Locomotive Breath Cave, their body temperatures dropping degree by degree, their hope fading along with their consciousness. Finally, more resources were brought into the search. Experienced cavers, who actually knew what they were doing, joined the rescue effort and went back into Locomotive Breath Cave for another search. And this time, they found them. Both men were alive. Barely. They'd stopped shivering completely. Their core body temperatures had dropped into the danger zone, where your heart can stop, where your organs begin shutting down, where you slip into unconsciousness and never wake up. They were hypothermic to the point that death was probably only hours away. The rescuers acted fast. They gave the men food and water, small amounts because you can't just feed someone in severe hypothermia without risking complications. They wrapped them in warming blankets, those metallic emergency blankets designed to reflect body heat back to the person. And they waited. You can't just grab someone in severe hypothermia and drag them out of a cave. Moving them too quickly, warming them too fast, can actually kill them. The sudden circulation of cold blood from the extremities back to the heart can cause cardiac arrest. The rescuers had to wait for the men's core temperatures to rise enough that they started shivering again. Shivering meant their bodies were recovering, that they could move safely. Eventually, after warming up enough, both men started shivering. It was a good sign. It meant they might survive this. The rescuers helped them to their feet and began the slow process of assisting them out of the cave. One of the men made it almost all the way. He walked through the passages, climbed over the obstacles, made it to within 100 feet of the cave entrance, so close he could probably see daylight. And then he collapsed. His body had nothing left. 4 days without food, without warmth, without hope, and he'd pushed himself to the absolute limit just to get that close to freedom. The rescuers had to load him into a litter, a specialized stretcher designed for cave rescue, and carry him those final 100 feet out of locomotive breath cave. After 4 days underground, after coming within hours of death, he was finally brought back into sunlight. Both men made a full recovery. Their bodies bounced back. Their hypothermia resolved. Physically, they were fine. But here's what makes this story so infuriating and frustrating. Every single part of this disaster was preventable. They chose to enter a cave they didn't understand. They chose to go without proper training. They chose to bring inadequate lighting. They chose to keep going when their first flashlight died. They chose to split up when they got lost. Every decision they made was wrong, and every wrong decision nearly killed them. The rental truck company probably got a hell of a late fee. The family spent 4 days terrified. The rescue team spent hours underground searching, risking their own safety to save 2 men who'd created their own disaster through sheer recklessness. October 12th, 2024. Daryl Nicholas Pascoe and his wife Sue arrived in Malta for a week-long holiday, ready to explore the Mediterranean island's crystal-clear waters and spectacular dive sites. At 66 years old, Daryl was an experienced dive master, someone who had achieved advanced certification levels, someone who had logged countless dives over his career. Malta was a bucket list destination for divers, its waters home to numerous shipwrecks that attracted underwater enthusiasts from around the world. The P-29 wreck was one of Malta's most popular dive sites. The former patrol boat had been deliberately sunk to create an artificial reef, settling on the seafloor where it provided both habitat for marine life and an accessible wreck for divers of various skill levels. The wreck lay at a manageable depth, its structure largely intact, offering the thrill of wreck penetration without the extreme technical demands of deeper sites. Daryl prepared for the dive with his assigned dive buddy. In recreational diving, the buddy system is fundamental, 2 divers working together, monitoring each other, ready to assist if problems develop. They checked their equipment, reviewed the dive plan, and entered the water. The conditions were good. Clear visibility, calm seas, the kind of Mediterranean diving that draws people from across Europe. They descended toward the P-29 wreck, equalizing pressure in their ears and sinuses as they went deeper. Equalization is critical in diving. As pressure increases with depth, air spaces in the body must adjust, or painful and potentially dangerous pressure imbalances develop. Most divers equalize easily by pinching their nose and gently blowing, forcing air through the eustachian tubes to balance pressure in the middle ear. Daryl and his buddy reached the wreck and began exploring. The patrol boat structure loomed in the blue water, encrusted with marine growth, fish darting through openings and around the superstructure. This was what divers came to Malta for, the combination of history, marine life, and the unique experience of swimming through human-made structures claimed by the sea. 3 minutes into the dive, something went wrong. Daryl signaled to his buddy that he wanted to ascend. Not the calm, planned signal of someone finishing a dive, but an urgent communication that indicated a problem. His buddy acknowledged, and they began ascending together. But then, Daryl did something that violated one of diving's most fundamental safety rules. He went straight to the surface without making controlled stops. In diving, ascent rate is critical. Rising too quickly causes the gases dissolved in your blood and tissues under pressure to come out of solution too rapidly, forming bubbles. This is decompression sickness, the bends, where nitrogen bubbles form in joints, blood vessels, and organs, causing pain, paralysis, or death. But there's another danger from rapid ascent: pulmonary barotrauma. As a diver ascends, the air in their lungs expands as pressure decreases. If you hold your breath while ascending, that expanding air has nowhere to go. It overpressurizes the lungs, potentially rupturing delicate alveoli, the tiny air sacs where oxygen exchange occurs. The damage can be immediate and catastrophic. Air can be forced into the bloodstream, creating arterial gas embolism. The lungs can be torn, causing pneumothorax, collapsed lung. The expanding air can damage the pulmonary system so severely that breathing becomes impossible. Daryl shot to the surface, ascending far too quickly for safe decompression. His dive buddy followed, trying to keep up, trying to understand what was happening. When they broke the surface, Daryl was in severe distress. His buddy grabbed him, trying to keep him afloat, trying to assess the situation. Another person nearby saw the emergency and moved to help. Then Daryl went into cardiac arrest. His heart stopped beating. His breathing ceased. In the water, with waves and movement making everything more difficult, his dive buddy and the other rescuer struggled to keep him afloat while beginning CPR. Chest compressions in the water are nearly impossible. You need a firm surface to compress effectively. They needed to get him to shore immediately. They hauled Daryl through the water to the nearest point of land, every second critical. Once on solid ground, they began proper CPR, chest compressions and rescue breaths, fighting to restart his heart, fighting to force oxygen into lungs that had been catastrophically damaged by the too rapid ascent. Other divers and people on shore joined the effort. Someone called for emergency medical services. Paramedics arrived and took over resuscitation efforts. They had advanced equipment, medications that could potentially restart his heart, experience with diving emergencies. Daryl was rushed to the nearest hospital. The emergency team worked to stabilize him, but the damage was too severe. Daryl Nicholas Pascoe was pronounced dead. The cause of death was determined as fatal diving-related pulmonary barotrauma due to too rapid ascent. Not decompression sickness, not the bends, but damage to his lungs from expanding air during the uncontrolled rush to the surface. But why had Daryl ascended so rapidly? What had caused an experienced dive master to violate basic safety protocols and shoot straight to the surface? The inquest examined multiple possibilities. The investigation revealed that Daryl hadn't dived in 18 months before this Malta trip. An 18-month gap between dives isn't necessarily dangerous, but it means skills can become rusty, responses can be slower, and comfort levels underwater might decrease. Additionally, Daryl had an undiagnosed heart condition, a pre-existing issue that he wasn't aware of, and that medical professionals in Malta might not have detected even with testing. More significantly, Daryl had not provided a medical certificate from his GP showing he was fit to dive. Diving organizations typically require medical clearance, particularly for older divers, to ensure no underlying conditions make diving dangerous. But Daryl had chosen a diving school that didn't require this paperwork, accepting him based on his previous experience and dive master certification alone. Thomas Grigor, consultant pathologist with Royal Cornwall Hospital, testified that the undiagnosed heart condition would likely have played only a minor part in the tragedy. He noted that a medical examination in Malta might not have revealed the condition anyway, but he also explained that there could have been various reasons why Daryl rushed to the surface. Equipment malfunction was one possibility, a regulator free-flowing or failing, creating panic about air supply. A medical episode underwater was another. Perhaps the undiagnosed heart condition caused symptoms that triggered panic. But Grigor suggested the most likely explanation. Daryl was unable to equalize pressure while at the bottom of the dive. Failure to equalize creates excruciating pain. The pressure differential in the middle ear causes intense, stabbing pain that can be disorienting and panic-inducing. The pain can be so severe that it overwhelms rational thought. A diver experiencing this might make the desperate decision to surface immediately, seeking relief from the agony, forgetting or ignoring the safety protocols that dictate controlled ascent rates. If Daryl couldn't equalize, if the pressure in his ears was building to unbearable levels, His 3 minutes at the wreck might have been 3 minutes of escalating pain and growing panic. The signal to his buddy to ascend might have been the moment when the pain became too much to endure, and the rapid, uncontrolled ascent might have been driven by desperation to escape the pressure, to reach the surface where the pain would stop. But the ascent itself created far worse problems than ear pain. As Daryl rose rapidly through the water column, the air in his lungs expanded. If he held his breath, either consciously or because panic prevented him from breathing normally, that expanding air had nowhere to go. It overpressurized his lungs, rupturing tissue, damaging the delicate structures required for breathing. By the time he reached the surface, his lungs were so badly damaged that cardiac arrest followed almost immediately. Assistant Coroner Guy Davies, summarizing the evidence, noted that Daryl had been healthy before his death and was an experienced diver. But it was not possible to determine the exact reason why he rushed to the surface too quickly. The conclusion was recorded as, Mr. Pascoe died from a diving-related pulmonary barotrauma following a rapid ascent for reasons unknown.